Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This legislation is called the Future Made in Australia Bill, but what it should be called is the Future is Poor in Australia under the Labor Bill. Supposedly, the Future Made in Australia agenda is targeted to address major structural and strategic challenges that the Australian economy faces. The Labor government says support is needed to crowd in necessary private investment to scale up priority industries that will help the Australian economy navigate and prosper throughout these challenges. The Australian government's Future Made in Australia plan identifies renewable hydrogen, or green hydrogen, as a priority industry. This will cost taxpayers an estimated $6.7 billion over a decade in production tax incentives alone. In other words, this is just welfare for billionaires. One of the companies and people set to benefit from this welfare of billions is Fortescue, founded by Mr Andrew Forrest, who have promised 15 million tonnes of green hydrogen by 2030. Fortescue opened Australia's largest hydrogen electrolyser manufacturing facility in Gladstone, in my electorate of Flynn, in April this year, promising thousands of green hydrogen jobs. However, on opening, it will employ just 26 people. Back in July, Fortescue was forced to dramatically scale back their ambitions, unveiling a plan to sack up to 700 workers and postpone the ambitious 15 million tonne target they'd set for hydrogen fuel production by the end of the decade. I recently applied for a right to information access request through the Gladstone Ports Corporation. This RTI found the Gladstone Ports Corporation, a government-owned corporation, has plans for a proposed hydrogen industry in Gladstone, which will need 110 gigawatts of renewable energy to produce 4 million tonnes of hydrogen a year. To be clear, this is approximately double the entire electrical generating capacity of the Australian grid, just for this one proposal. And this is economic insanity. The proposal will require 10,000 wind turbines, 2,500 square kilometres of solar panels to be built, and 45,000 megalitres of water each year to reach this target. To produce industrial hydrogen, you need three things: cheap, reliable energy, a huge, reliable water source, and a competitive market. And at the moment, we have none of these. I previously asked the following questions that have not been answered, and I'll ask again. How much money will be directed to Gladstone? Where will these wind turbines go? Over the Great Barrier Reef? Where will all the solar panels go? On prime agricultural land? Is this funding for hydrogen more money and subsidies for billionaires like Twiggy Forrest? Where will the water come from for Gladstone's hydrogen industry? I say this as the Fitzroy to Gladstone pipeline will provide 19,000 megalitres of water for industry at Gladstone. Even with the unlikely possibility of the hydrogen industry receiving the full allocation of 19,000 megalitres, where is the remaining 26,000 megalitres of water going to come from? There has been speculation that large-scale desalination plants could fill the void. And according to the Water Corporation of Western Australia, seawater desalination is 4 times more energy-intensive than groundwater collection and over 40 times more energy-intensive than water sourced from dams. And this math just does not stand up. So the plan to use energy to convert seawater into water and then use more energy to convert the water into hydrogen. My good friend and colleague Senator Matthew Canavan recently said, dig coal, extract national gas and build nuclear. That is a future made in Australia, and I couldn't agree more. And here's some facts about these three industries that those opposite might not be aware of. Coal is used to produce electricity, iron and steel, cement, alumina, paper and chemicals, and it is also used as a component in thousands of everyday products, including soaps, aspirin, solvents, dyes, plastics and carbon fibres. More than 220 tonnes of coal is required to build a wind turbine. Australia exported $127 billion worth of coal in the 22-23 year. The coal industry employs 48,000 people in 2023. The Australian gas industry is a mainstay of the national economy and is an irreplaceable ingredient for our manufacturing base. driving billions in economic activity through its myriad of through-chain applications. Gas in Australia generates $121 billion in economic activity, underpinning 5.25% of GDP, up 42% on the previous year. Australia's gas network sector and its networks support 258,000 full-time local jobs, up 17,000 on the previous year. Gas is vital and irreplaceable feedstock in making of many things we need for everyday life, including plastics, fertilisers, pharmaceuticals, rubber, propellants, refrigeration, adhesives and cosmetics. Deputy Speaker, the Productivity Commission says $1 billion commitment to make more solar panels in Australia under Anthony Albanese's Future Made in Australia program should be retrospectively subject to a tougher natural interest framework test. Allowing sectors to bypass the national interest framework process would undermine its role in disciplining the spending. Yet Labor is already breaking their own rules when it suits them. Key elements of Labor's Future Made in Australia agenda include $22.7 billion PSI quantum contract bypassed the national interest framework sector and assessments. There are serious questions to answer about the decision to make this investment, with it increasingly clear that the Minister Husic decided to invest in this business independent of any department appraisers, analysis or recommendation. Treasury was not consulted prior to the decision to invest in solar manufacturing, and their subsequent analysis has said that this is not a sound investment. The Productivity Commission were not consulted on details of other proposed investments prior to their announcement, and we are already seeing that this policy is not effective. The Solar Sunshot program has been refused to be backed by the Treasurer's own Secretary, with the main proponent of the policy who stood alongside the Prime Minister as he announced the initiative, cutting back its staff and replacing their CEO. And Labor's production credits are failing to deliver for the struggling nickel industry, with the promise of future subsidies not holding back the tide of international price pressures and rising domestic prices through energy, through tax and through workplace laws. Deputy Speaker, this nation is already feeling the effects of their attack on the manufacturing industry. We're seeing a tripling of manufacturing insolvencies under the Labor government. Labor's record on essentials for the Australian manufacturing is a disgrace. The cost of energy continues to rise thanks to Labor's renewables-only policy, and they are just going to keep going up under this Labor government. Labor's renewable-only plan will impose 58 million solar panels, 3,500 new industrial wind turbines and up to 28,000 kilometres of new transmission lines across the country. Energy experts have warned the cost of Labor's rollout will be between $1.2 and $1.5 trillion. Labor will also require 34 times the current amount of utility-scale variable renewable energy in the national electricity market to meet its hydrogen export ambitions. A recent analysis shows that there are some 17,000 wind turbines proposed to be built across the Australian landscape. Under this plan, we're going to see blackouts and brownouts. We don't want the California-type situation in our country where there are scheduled blackouts and brownouts because businesses simply just will not stay here. High energy use businesses won't compete. They can't manufacture in an environment like that. You can't run a full-time economy on part-time power. Like the other 19 of the G20 countries, the biggest economies in the world, Australia needs to take the decision that is right for our country, and that is nuclear energy. There are around 439 operational nuclear plants in the world. Australia hosts 33% of the world's proven uranium deposits and is currently the third largest producer of uranium after Kazakhstan and Canada. In 1958, Australia opened its first nuclear reactor, Lucas Heights, in the southern suburbs of Sydney. And we've seen this government introduce overbearing industrial relations laws, which is making life tougher for Australian businesses by increasing costs, complexity and red tape, and will likely lead to job losses. We've seen Labor Greens government introduce safeguard mechanisms, which represents one of the world's most disgraceful carbon taxes, which will only see prices soar even further for struggling businesses. Every time they are in government, Labor makes sneaky deals with the Greens against the interests of families, businesses and our manufacturers. It is as simply as no industry, no manufacturing means no jobs, no future for making things in Australia. Deputy Speaker, the Coalition is not the only one raising serious concerns with Labor's plan. Daniel Wood, Productivity Commissioner, the government's key economic advisor, appointed by Jim Chalmers, has said, if we are supporting industries that don't have long-term competitive advantage, that can be an ongoing cost. It diverts resources that workers and capital away from other parts of the economy where they might generate high-value uses. We risk creating a class of business that is reliant on government subsidies, and that can't be very effective in coming back for more. Your infants grow up and they turn into very hungry teenagers, and that's the kind of hard to turn the tap off. When asked whether Future Made in Australia contained tax reform, Ms Wood explicitly said this is not tax reform. On alternative policies, including lowering the corporate tax, Ms Wood offered it would make us more internationally competitive. Daniel Wood is not alone, with former Productivity Commissioner Mr Gary Banks described the FMIA as a fool's errand that risks repeating mistakes of the past by propping up political favourites. Indeed, he said, seeking to obtain benefits to society through subsidies for particular firms and industries, including in the form of tax concessions, has proven a fool's errand, particularly where the competitive fundamentals are lacking. Mr Banks likened the scheme to Hotel California, saying many will enter the program but few will leave. In response to this, the Prime Minister called Mr Banks a flat earther. Another eminent economist, Professor Richard Holden, defended Mr Banks, saying the Prime Minister's insult was wrong and uncalled for. Professor Holden said the PM says all the wrong things, and his main argument for subsidies is that other countries are doing it. This is like a primary school child telling the teacher he started it. Stephen Hamilton, independent economist, has said there are many problems with industrial policy, and this is a big one. It's why I tend to favour more neutral investment incentives, like a lower corporate tax rate or accelerated depreciation. I thought we'd learned the lessons from the past, but apparently not, and the bad old days are back. When comparisons with the US IRA were drawn, this is scale. It is the US that can produce at reasonable cost. That is a totally different position to doing so in Australia. Without a large domestic market, exports are the only way for the Australian economy to achieve scale. But we are so far away from the kinds of markets we could sell into that shipping costs put us at a distinct disadvantage. No amount of government subsidy is going to get around that. It's not just economists questioning Labor, it's their union backers as well. The Australian Manufacturing Workers Union, reported by the ABC as the dominant left faction union and a source of talent for the Labor in Parliament, won't want Treasury to have a central role in the Future Made in Australia. They believe Treasury has limited expertise. Deputy Speaker, Mr Speaker, Australians want and deserve something better. The Coalition Government will do three things. We will steer our nation out of the current domestic crisis. We will not simply talk about the challenges of our time. We will meet them head-on with action to carve out a more secure future. More importantly, we will make decisions that set up our nation for success for generations to come. The Flynn electorate is a largely blue-collar electorate consisting of diverse industries such as mining and resources, agriculture and heavy industry, and many small and medium-sized businesses. However, every single one of these industries is under attack from the Labor government, and I will continue to fight for these hard-working men and women that pay Australia's bills, funds Australia's schools, hospitals, roads and so on. That is why I oppose this Future Made in Australia bill. In other words, the future is poorer for Australia under this bill.